Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast informs companies just like yours why we need to do this together. This free service allows you to obtain business insights to help develop and grow your company to allow for a better lifestyle. Together we have the ability to provide valuable insights, knowledge, guidance and personal resources accumulated over many years. This podcast is developed for you to claw back your valuable time and hopefully help with your forward goals. This podcast is all about giving back. No strings attached, no funny business, no get-rich-quick schemes, but simply to provide some of mine and our amazing co-hosts their wisdom, stories, and hopefully some valuable insight. Together we have the ability to grow, sustain, and provide a healthy work-life balance for all the cleaners and restorers. As this is totally free, please subscribe, write a review, and share this podcast today. Now onto the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to season 3 now of the Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast. So this season is a little bit different. This season is based on a scenario. With that scenario, we're going to have different speakers come in and discuss different aspects of a claim. Now, full disclosure for this season, myself, I have 25 years experience in the carpet cleaning and restoration industry. So the information provided is going to be based off my experience and the experience from the people that are invited to the discussion. It's not going to be correct for all situations as things change between states, parts of the country, even from residential to commercial, from city, if you're a business in the city, to what they class as a country or an outside the city business as well. And it's also going to change between who the providers of the work are as well. So this is a general outline only, and it's based off my experience and the experience of the people that have been invited to sit down and discuss. So throughout the year, the different topics will be of a 4-bedroom, 2-story house. So I'll just quickly run through the scenario of the property before we get into the discussion. So it is a 2-story brick home in Brisbane, build date of 2002. So the importance of what we're talking about here is that location is one thing. So the environment the location plays will be a factor for some of the materials that we'll talk about, and also the build date. So any property prior to 1990, there may be some times you may have to think about asbestos or lead paint or something along those lines. So throughout the journey of this year's podcast, this scenario is based off a 2002 built home. So upstairs, it is a 4-bedroom, a bathroom, hallway, an ensuite master bathroom, walk-in robe, a toilet, so a separate toilet. Downstairs is the staircase, the kitchen, living, dining room, a laundry, lounge room, entrance, and a double garage. So the house has been remodeled throughout recently, and by remodeled, it's had a fresh coat of paint, a new flooring put down. In basis of this claim, it is an insurance claim. It's going to be from the same provider. It's going to be a building and content claim. The property owners have owned the property for 5 years, and it's the same insurance company for both building and content. Now, they do have plenty of insurance for both building and both content. So some of the details for the claim is that the claim has come to you via a third-party restorer builder for both building and content. So if we look at upstairs, we look at the flooring that's on the upstairs areas. It's a click-lock flooring. There's tiles upstairs in the wet areas, carpet in the bedrooms. There's split air conditioning systems in all the bedrooms upstairs. So there's no click-lock flooring upstairs. It's only downstairs, the click-lock flooring. So downstairs has click-lock flooring, the kitchen, living, dining, and the entrance. There's tiles in the laundry. There's carpet in the lounge room and on the stairs, and the split air conditioning units downstairs as well. So this is a made-up house. There is a photo and a description of the property, and those links will be on the podcast through the YouTube channel and also on the podcast Facebook page. So it is actually a real house, but it's just a made-up house with scenario for this, for what this is. So the contents in the property is moderately furnished. So it's not a overloaded property. It's not a hoarding house. They do have some kids. So, you know, you've got your normal beds, your bedside tables, a couple of rugs. You've got the Manchester, you've got the clothing, you've got some soft toys and so forth. So there is a little bit of history with health for the occupants. So both parents are both 44 years old and they're both healthy. They do have 3 children, 14, 12, and 10, 2 boys, 2 girls and 1 boy. The boy has an immune deficiency, while the 2 girls suffer from asthma. So it's something we will have to take into consideration. So again, this is a made-up claim. So the date of the loss is somewhere between the 22nd of December and the 20th of January. Actually, we're going to change that. It's just going to be from, let me change this. It's going to be from the 20th of January. So 20th of January. Sorry, just let me change this. And they're away for that weekend, and we got the call and on the 21st to attend on the 21st. So it's a backflow from the water from the upstairs toilet. So in all essence, it's going to be a category 3 loss. So that's pretty significant as well. So the areas that have been affected. So the areas that have been affected from the upstairs area is all bedrooms of the upstairs area, the walk-in row, the toilet, the main bathroom, a section of the ensuite as well. So it's cupped up over the tiles there. And then downstairs, it's come through the floors, through the ceiling, which is a yellow tongue floor, through the void, through the ceiling, which is a plasterboard ceiling, and it's come down into the lounge, living rooms, and the kitchen, down the stairs a bit, and also it's actually gone into the kitchen a bit as well. So this is a bit of a layout of the property here, and you can see the flooring there as well. So the clients themselves have $700,000 in building insurance and $145,000 in contents insurance. They've been put in temporary accommodation. So that is the scenario. Today we have Lydia. Lydia is from a restoration company in Brisbane. Her role is leading the company for administration as part of her role, and that is to build the administration team as far as how to handle a claim, how to handle clients themselves, how to handle the insurance company, and how to get the best out of everybody to make the claim go as smoothly as possible. So there's also a bit of having to deal with outside trades as well. So a full barrel of things that she has to put together. But anyway, welcome, Lydia. Thanks for coming along. Maybe just give everyone a little bit of a heads up on who you are and a bit of your background, and then we'll probably get started with a discussion of the topic.
Of course. So I have a background in HR, accounts and marketing. I'm quite new to the restoration industry. I've been with this company for 2 years now. In that time, it's just been a whirlwind of learning. It's a whole different language, dealing with many different people, a lot of the time people who are quite upset because they've had loss to their property. So it's a different way of looking at things from an administration point of view. I've come from a heavy accounts background, so I deal with everything that the business needs. I handle the staff as well, so it's a well-rounded position for me, but my focus with the business that I'm at was creating procedures that the administration team can use so that we're consistent with how we're dealing with people and ensuring that we have a high level of service as well.
Fantastic. I guess just discussing on that topic of what you bring to the business is the systems in place. So obviously being in this for 25 years, I've seen the industry change. How has the industry changed just in the 2 years that you've seen with the systems that were in place at the start and they're in place now? And how is it running better or worse? What's your thoughts on that?
So our suppliers and the insurance companies require a lot more information from us. We have to be extremely detailed in the reports that we're giving. We also have to make sure that we're giving that information in a timely manner. So all the work that we get is based off our performance in meeting those expectations and those service line agreements. Since I've started, I've noticed that those expectations are getting higher and higher. So we just have to have a higher standard of work to make sure that we're getting that information through and it's the correct information. I think that, yeah, it's just the expectations of the industry are extremely high at the moment, and it's quite competitive as well. So you've got to try and get that competitive edge wherever you can. And that for us has come from being the best at what we do and giving that information as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. So just for everyone's information, there is a new certificate 4 in cleaning, and the title of the certificate 4 that we'll be working from is the Restore Water Damage Structures and Content portion of the Cert 4 training package. So this was released back in November of 2021. It went through all the government bodies to get published, so it is out now, and this code is CPP CL04104 if someone wants to look that up. So what we'll be doing through this podcast, we'll be going through the application, so the job, what we're doing, the field of competencies. So we're also looking at the criteria for that as well. And the benefit of this podcast and the podcast in the future, so when this certificate is released, there'll be a point there people can come and listen to and get some information to help them through that process. So the first one we're looking at is the administration side. It's very, very important for businesses to get their administration, not only their team, but their practice of administration as best as they can. And the reason I say this is because even though it's a heavy burden and it's got heavy over the years, a lot rides on being able to remove the dangers of owning a business, I suppose, if something went wrong, where that blame's going to lie. So if you can't show that you have done things correctly, well, then there's a good chance that if something was to go wrong, it's going to come down to the lowest pecking order, and it's normally the cleaners and the restorers. So the whole idea about the podcast, this whole season of podcast, is to really dive deep into each aspect of a claim, or it may not even be a claim. It may be, we'll be talking about chemicals, we'll be talking about carpet cleaning, floor cleaning, not only restoration, but indoor environmental, what you're walking into, what your staff members are walking into, so WHS as well, and a whole array of things. So what we're going to do is try and bring the whole gamut of this industry together in this year's podcast, which is going to be based around a residential claim. Next year, we'll be looking at a commercial claim, just to do that as well. So the idea is to go through and check off each of the elements that will be in the Cert 4 into this module. So let's go back to right at the start. So as a insurance repair company, the majority of the work that the company you work in comes from self-advertising or word of mouth, or does it come from partnerships they've had with other companies, builders or insurance companies?
So most of the time it is from partnerships that we've previously had. We do also get a lot of private work coming through, which then can lead to better contracts with more suppliers, but predominantly it's the same suppliers. So it's ensuring we keep those people happy.
Yeah, so I suppose clarification around how how this type of job, because we're going off this scenario,
Yep.
may come about. So how would this job normally come to the office? How would this job come about?
So usually the insured would call their insurance company and lodge a claim. They then pass it off to a third party or a builder who doesn't have a restoration arm. And then we're the third person in the line. So we then get the job. That either comes through usually as an email, especially with the suppliers that we have a good relationship with. We know how to read their purchase orders, or alternatively a phone call as well. So some of our suppliers like to know whether we can get out there that same day. It just depends. It's either phone or email.
Okay, so they triage the claim themselves as to how important it is for you to get out there. Is that what I'm hearing there?
Not necessarily. So unfortunately, our suppliers are quite busy. Not only are they dealing with the restoration side of things, they're also dealing with the reinstatement and the building works. So unfortunately, in our industry, we don't necessarily get the correct information. We'll get maybe one or two lines. For example, make safe, toilet overflow. So we don't know any of the information until we triage the claim ourselves.
Okay, so let's go into that triage point. Obviously, depending on the size of the company and the administration side, there might be one person sitting in the office that takes that call or that email, or it may go off to a team member that looks after that account. What's the process of whoever it may be to gather as much information as possible, and what sort of information are they looking at to obtain?
So for us, the first step is getting those initial contact details into our system and also attaching the purchase order that's been sent through. We then, depending on the claim, so for a water claim, we have a list of questions that we ask. So regardless of how big the job is or how small the job is, we always ask the same questions because it can trigger insureds to think about other things that they might not necessarily have thought about. For example, has the water affected power points or lights? Do we need to get an electrician out there? The types of flooring that we mentioned in the scenario, it can just be maybe a 1 hour job if it's a concrete floor or a tiled floor, whereas it could be 3 or 4 hours if it's carpet and needs water extraction. So asking the same questions and determining what are the most important questions for your company is so important in that initial stage.
So how did you come about getting those questions to ask? Is it trial and error? Is it built up over time? Are you happy with it where it is?
Yeah, really happy with where it is. So it was a combination of built up over time, but also talking to our technicians as well, because they're the ones that are actually going out to the job site. So finding out what information is important for them. What do they like to know? And so you kind of combine what administration needs to know for their end, as well as what the technicians need to know. So it's really a group effort.
So you're actually starting to build a scope of that job from the initial phone call with the client. What information are you trying to find out with the client? Are you trying to find out, obviously, their name, their address, make sure that's all correct?
Yes.
Who's going to be on site? Are you also letting the clients know the technician's name that will be attending site, or what's the part from there?
So we don't actually tell them which technician's going to be attending because we have so many jobs coming through. That section of the administration scheduling is done by a separate person. We always let them know that we're going to send them out an SMS of when we're going to be there, and then the technician is going to send them an SMS with their name when they're leaving for their job. So it's that constant communication. quite often people are also quite frantic and stressed when you call them. So just getting that stuff put in writing is really, really important too. So once we've done the triaging, we also send out a welcome email. It has our contact details, who we are, what they're likely to experience on site. And that's just a reminder that they can go back to and look at when they're less stressed or if they need to get extra information from us.
That's actually really good. And I suppose that's what we tend to forget in this industry, is that we're doing this day to day. We see it very often, and the client doesn't. It's a big disruption to their life as well. They might be flat out with other things. Obviously, things go on,
and the thing you have to remember as well is these people aren't just talking to you as a restoration company.
Absolutely.
They've spoken to their insurance company, the third-party builder, potentially plumbers, electricians. So it is extremely overwhelming for people. And it's just trying to make things a little bit easier, offering them reassurance and just giving them the information that they need when they can digest it.
So the other thing we're going to look at there is site access. So is that you're talking to the clients about site access, how to get on, dogs and all that sort of stuff, or?
Correct. So for us, site access is one, who's going to be at the property? Are they over 18? That's really important. Is there parking on site? Can we park in your driveway? Is there street parking? And we also, as well, confirming we've obviously confirmed their mobile number. Can we call you if we have a problem? So just making sure that those three simple things ensures that when your technicians turn up to site, they aren't being turned away or they can't get access, and that saves you on time and money as well.
And that someone's going to be there for them as well. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I guess that if we're building a scope of works for the job itself, what sort of information are you looking to get out of the first initial contact with the client, as far as what does the technician need to provide back to the office, and what is the office providing to the technician about that job?
So the things that we ask in our triage questions are just confirming when the incident happened, how many rooms have been affected, the type of flooring that's in each room, have they noticed any mold at the property, because that's a whole nother ball game in terms of restoration. Are there any electrical issues? Has a plumber attended and fixed the issue? These are all questions that if they say no to, say, a plumber or an electrician, we need to feed that information back up to the builders, because that's something that they need to organise, or they need to give us approval to organise. There's no point in us sending our technician out when there's no power to the property and we can't put drying equipment in. Okay. So for us, those are probably the questions that we ask. When the boys get on site, there is so much information that they gather. So firstly, it's important for them to do their JSAs and make sure that it's safe for them to enter the site.
Yeah, can you explain what that may entail, the JSAs?
Yeah, absolutely. So with any type of job, there's going to be different risks associated with it. If a normal water job like this, you could, one, have issues with the power. Are there electrical issues? Slips, trips and falls are really important as well. Wet surfaces, you don't want people running around frantically in a job site. Once we put the equipment in as well, it's really important that we're taping down our cords so that we're leaving this property. And although, for example, in this scenario, the insureds aren't left on site, you've got to remember that other trades are going to be entering that workplace. A builder might come in. So you don't want to leave the job in an unsafe situation. You mentioned before asbestos as well. So even if someone tells us that the property was built in 2002, we always question it in the triage, and the boys are still always looking out, because it only takes one mistake, and with someone not knowing when a house was built, and you can potentially cause a massive issue for the company.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I guess what we're trying to do there is we're trying to minimize risk. Do you, when you're trying to assess all this sort of stuff, how do you capture that information? Is it via video, photograph? Is it a script that the boys run by? What's the process there?
So everything we document via photograph. So as soon as someone walks into, before they even walk into the property, actually, we take pictures of the front of the property. As soon as we walk in, we do overviews of the room, identify.
Can we go through these one at a time? You're right.
Yeah.
What's the reason for doing the photos of the front of the property?
You've got to think about if there's a scope of works or further works that you need to do. Will you need a skip bin? Is there somewhere that you can put it on there? Is it safe for people to park there? It's just all these little things. Certain things, like I've had an insured claim that we've damaged their car by our van, but when you look at the photos, there was no room for us to park next to the car, so we've actually done street parking. So it's about protecting yourself and the business as well as gathering information.
Yeah, minimizing risk, absolutely. And a picture tells 1,000 words, and it's so much easier to have a look at a photo if the boys have it. And again, it's something that the guys, girls or guys on site have to get accustomed to. So how do you train them to actually ensure that they're actually following those process? What's the process there?
So when we have a new technician or a trade assistant start, they always go out with someone who's been with us for a number of years, who is quite experienced and who we have the utmost faith and trust in. So they actually do the training on the job site. What we do, though, is we provide them with a list of what the expectations are for a first attendance. That way they have something to refer back to and check off when they're eventually able to start running the jobs themselves or when they start going out on their own. So a lot of it is on the job training, but it's also providing that additional information to refer back to.
So you would say SOPs are a critical part of the business?
100%. So any new employee, that's one of the first things that they do in their first week is to go through the SOPs. We're very big on, we have safety team meetings once a week. It's just keeping things in the forefront of people's minds as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so we've got to the front of the house. We know this is a category 3 loss, so there will be some OH&S things that the guys would have to obviously do on this job. Can you run me through what they might do with that JSA as far as their safety, and how is that documented?
So the JSA is on PDF. So our JSAs have a list of questions that kind of trigger the boys to look and assess the situation, whether that's, is there any asbestos on the property? Is there any electrical issues? Are there slips, trips and falls? So these are kind of jogging their memory, and they actually have to physically tick and sign next to it. Okay. Then underneath is where they put their more detailed works. So for example, if they're using any power tools, if they're removing skirting, all of our boys we use scenarios with on a regular basis so that they know what to put in those JSAs, what they should be looking for. And the other thing is we might be doing 1, 2, 3 site attendances. Every time they do a site attendance, they do a new JSA, because who knows what could have happened to that site when we've left it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so the walking with masks, this is a Cat 3 loss. They've got gloves, PPE on, that sort of stuff. Yep. Is that documented? Is that photographed and documented?
It is. Yep. So it's documented in the reports that we've got our PPE on. Okay. Yeah. And we can also see it in the photos as well. So when the boys are taking their pictures, quite often you can see their hands holding up a moisture reader. So we know that they're wearing their correct PPE.
So they've walked into the property. How do they determine what category of loss of water it is? Is there a process for that?
There is. I'm probably not the best person to talk to about that. Right. I do know a little bit about it, but all of our boys go through their training courses and they know how to identify it. From the administration point of view, we trust what they tell us. So, okay. Yeah, you've got to have a bit of faith in your technicians, because we're not on site.
They definitely have to go in and make sure that what the claim states, that's what it is, and then they document that. So if they say it's a burst water pipe, that someone hasn't put a garden hose into the house and tried to get extra, they can
Absolutely.
actually go through and try and identify. How do they do that? Is it through moisture readers? Is it through thermal imaging? How do they do that, do you
Yep.
think?
So when we first enter a house, everything is visual. So we do our overview photos, we check if there's any pre-existing damage. They then go through and do thermal imaging. So that's not always 100% accurate. So
No.
the thermal can pick up metal framework, that sort of stuff. So that's just giving you an idea of where to look initially. And then it goes on to the moisture reading. So that's your most accurate way of telling where the moisture's traveled throughout the property. For us, though, as well, if an insured tells us it's only gone into a bedroom, we then go the extra step and check the rooms around it, because it's amazing how far water travels. So people don't understand. So you can't go off the information that you've given. You've got to go and investigate further yourselves.
So I suppose just noting on that as well, the client doesn't know what you know as a administrator or a technician as well. So they're only walking into something that they really don't know too much about and giving a visual assessment to somebody on an insurance desk, which then relays that on as well. So very good points there as well. So what I suppose what they're trying to do there is they'll be also trying to investigate what materials are in the property. So what's restorable and what's not restorable. What's the process for the insurance companies, I suppose, or the clients around disposal or restoring? Is there forms, paperwork? How does that all work?
Absolutely. So every supplier we have is slightly different. So that's why, as an administration team, it's really important to have those good relationships with your suppliers so you know what you can and can't do. In terms of disposing of content items, most places are happy provided you have a waiver signed. So a waiver takes the liability away from us as a business, but it also takes it away from the builders and the insurance company. In terms of, it's important to get the place dried as quickly as possible. So a lot of our suppliers actually encourage us to remove skirting boards, to try and assess, for example, a bulkhead might not dry unless we cut out the plaster. So it's just knowing how much you can do on that first attendance without getting approvals. That saves so much time and so much effort.
What do you mean by so much time? What seems to be the hold up, if that's the right word?
So for example, some suppliers won't let us do anything. So we then have to call them from site. They then have to try and call the insurance company. We won't get the answers straight away. So we'll leave our drying equipment in there, which is what we're supposed to do. We'll then be asked to return 2 or 3 days later. It still won't be dry. So you've got that time it takes for the administration team to be calling up, sending follow-up emails, chasing to get that answer, as well as your technician's time. It's much better to get in, get the job done quickly and efficiently so you can move on to the next job, rather than having these holdups where your equipment's stuck on a job site, and it makes us look bad as well.
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. Um, so what sort of training are the guys looking at for this industry? I suppose if you're new looking into this industry, there seems like to be a lot of different things you're looking at. You're looking at housing materials, you're looking at electrical issues, you're looking at floorings, build dates, talking to the clients is another one, paperwork. What are you looking for with a new employee, I suppose, walking into this sort of industry, and what can they sort of try to, I suppose, vision whilst they're in the industry, and what sort of training would be involved in that?
So recruitment for this industry I have found extremely difficult, because you're kind of looking for a unicorn. So you're looking for someone who doesn't mind doing the manual physical labor of the work and enjoys that, but is also quite technically savvy and book smart and can write a detailed report. So it is very hard to find a good employee that can shine in both those areas. For us, when we're looking, we like to see someone who has a good energy, because this is a really hard job. The boys are out sometimes for long hours pulling out wet carpet, so you've got to have that good energy and that positivity, and you've got to be a little bit book smart as well. So as you go on with this podcast, I think people will start to realize how much science and how much maths and things that the boys have to think about. It's not as simple as just walking in and throwing some equipment in and hoping for the best. So recruitment is very, very difficult, but when you find someone, it's just making sure that they have the tools and they feel supported. So having someone that they can call, like their manager who has that experience, and ask the questions on site. So we do a lot of video calls from site as well.
Okay.
So quite often it's the boys just showing us what's happening on site, asking for, telling us what they'd like to do, asking for opinions, and that doesn't come from the administration team, that comes from the higher technicians as well. So fostering that environment where people want to work together and want to collaborate and help each other out is probably one of the most valuable things we've found in our company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think synergy between staff members is underrated, I suppose, in these sorts of companies as well, because a lot of the people, I suppose, coming into the remediation cleaning industry, they haven't got that science background, they haven't got that efficacy of study, for 4 or 5 whatever years, and then go and do it. So it is a different dynamic when you're actually trying to get these people, and it's in an industry that people don't know as well. You only sort of come across as in an emergency. It's one of those industries. So the beauty about this industry, it is diverse, but it's a very diverse industry, and every day is like completely different. Every job is completely different, every client is completely different, and I guess it comes down to that working environment. If you can get a good culture, some people have bad days, it is what it is. We're only human. So how are you finding putting the systems in place? Because that's one thing you have been big on the last couple of years, is making sure those systems are in place. How are you finding it as that progresses? I suppose with the staff members that we've had staff members now for those 2 years, so that's kind of been nice in that perspective. But how has it been for you, changing some of the old ways that the company did do things to the new ways? How was that transition like?
So most people do not like change. It's within our human nature not to like change. So for me, adding new processes in, it was difficult in the beginning, but how we overcome that as a company was sitting down and having the conversations with the team as a whole, kind of engaging them in the change as well. What's going to make their life easier? What do they want to see? And for us, we've seen a really positive outcome from it, in a sense that when we have new administration people start, we can train them up now within a couple of weeks. Whereas before, it was just so overwhelming with the amount of information that they had to know and have to try and implement in order to do their job. With the technicians, it has been a little bit difficult, but now everyone is on the same page. Everyone's consistent, and they train the new people in the way that they've been trained. So it's really, really exciting. And as a team, I think we've come out stronger for it.
Is that made, again, it's change is hard, but has it made it now easier after all that hard work and transition is done? Is the outcome been worth the input?
100%. As a team and as a company, we are functioning at an extremely high level now, and that shows with the amount of jobs that we're now getting through, the positive feedback we're getting from not only clients but our suppliers as well. And people find it a lot easier. People like procedures, they like to know what's expected of them, and they like to be good at their job. So it's not micromanaging, it's just ensuring that everyone knows what's expected of them and how they can do their job properly.
Absolutely. People like to know where the goals are.
Absolutely.
So if we just let them run on the field and just run them until they puff out, they're not going to last long. But if you give them, in 15 minutes you'll come off and get an orange, they have a goal, it's like anything. So so it's a very good point, because I think a lot of companies, they sort of tend to forget that you're building structure in a business actually builds growth in that business as well. Yes. And it is, you do lose people from time to time, whether it's through retirement or they want to change jobs or they're not interested or whatever happens. And if you do have that structure in place, it is a lot easier to bring somebody in and train them, because if everyone's doing it the same way, naturally they have to do it that way as well. They tend to forget their old ways or other things as well. So it's very, very good system.
It's really encouraging as well, because the girls upstairs, when a new person starts, everyone can assist with the training. Everyone can answer the same question. So cohesiveness amongst the team is great.
Yeah, everything's same. Makes it much easier. Sorry, I'm just going through the list at the moment to make sure I tick them all off. So is there any specialist advice when the technicians go to site or the administration team are discussing that there will be some like litigation later that you might be worried about? So for instance, in this scenario, we talked about the occupants and the healthiness of the occupants. Having that sort of information that may not come across obviously on a work order. Is that something that you are asking for a triaging? And if so, when is that implemented and how is that implemented?
So we don't ask that during the triage question. The boys usually find that out when they go on site. Okay. So quite often people don't realize the severity of mold, or it's better to not freak people out over the phone. Once the boys are there, they can assess the situation. People are quite forthcoming when they think it's going to affect their health as well. So for us, it's a balance between, we have the insurance companies who don't want to spend a heap of money. So temporary accommodation is extremely expensive. And then we've got the insureds who don't want to be in a house that has a heap of equipment and it's hot. So it's really important for us to determine, is there actually a risk to a person's health? Not only their health, but you have to look at people who are quite elderly as well. Yeah. So you've got anyone that's at risk or is a red flag. What happens is the boys will call us in administration. We will immediately flag that with the insurance company or our supplier, and it's then their determination as to whether they get accommodation. So it's not up to us to make that call. We can provide our advice and pass on the information. The other thing is, with our technicians, it's really important that they know what they can and can't say on site.
Yeah.
So it only takes one comment and an insured will remember that in the back of their head and they will throw it back in your face if something goes wrong. So ensuring that professionalism is always adhered to on the job site is vital for us. Any of our new guys know that they're not to engage in conversations with the insureds unless a senior technician is there, because it only takes one slip up. And honestly, it can cause so many problems.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I don't think it's one that a lot of companies actually train on. And I think it's a very important point to point out, because as you said, you say mold to the wrong person and all of a sudden they're tearing out everything in their house. All the content has to go. The house has to be bulldozed down and blah, blah, blah. So it's very important. And again, I suppose the guys that are going to site, they aren't not scientists, but they're not, under the microscope actually identifying what the species of mold or what's actually bacteria or whatever, so.
So I think that's really important as well, is we are experts in our field. There are also experts in mold, like hygienists are going to be your best friend. Yeah. If you walk into a property and you think that there is a problem or the place is covered in mold, you need to get a baseline so that you can build your scope of works and make sure that you're not causing further damage and that the job is completed properly. So don't ever be afraid to recommend getting a hygienist out. If there are the red flags of elderly person, there's health issues, visible mold covering the entire property, sometimes things are just too big for restorers to handle on their own. So having that good relationship with other companies is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's all about, I'm going to keep going back to it, but it's about minimizing risk. Yes. So if you go outside your area of expertise, you're exposing other risks. So the key point of this is, if you don't know, seek advice. And I suppose that comes down to, managing a claim as well. I guess that's the biggest thing you do as an administration role, is managing claims. For instance, on this one, the ceiling might have fallen down. the guys aren't builders that go to site, or they're maybe not, or maybe not. But how do you form those relationships with? Obviously, this is an insurance claim comes from a builder, but how do you form those relationships if it's a private job or something else? To be able to have those people on call, let's just say that you're a carpet cleaner and you come across this maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Is there something that they can do? Because obviously they don't want to probably party up with a restorer, because then they'll think the restorer is going to take that work away from them. So if you're a smaller company or just getting into this, how do you get those relationships, and who do you know who to go to?
That's a really difficult question, actually.
Yeah,
Because there is always, unfortunately, in business, there's always this fear that someone is going to take the work off you. So if you introduce someone to someone, it's that fear mentality that people have. But I think knowing your limitations, if you are a cleaner and you do carpet cleaning, if you don't plan to have 30, 40 pieces of equipment and you walk into a whole property that's wet, it is important to be able to pass that information along to someone who can still help these people, because you will still get that repeat work of cleaning someone's carpets if you were able to help them in the situation. So I don't really know how to answer that question.
yeah.
Maybe you have some advice on it.
Again, I think with a lot of things that we do in business, it's based upon trust. You have to have that trust. It's the old scenario. You burn me once, shame on me. You, whatever it is, burn me twice, shame on me. So it's I guess it's who you know. Reach out to those who you know and who you can trust first of all, and then maybe ask their advice as well. But you can also ring up an insurance builder. You can just Google insurance builder, and a ton will come up. And maybe if you just talk to someone in the administration side, they might be kind enough to, say, look, this is the hygienist we use, and then talk to the hygienist and go from there. So there are ways to do those things, but again, you have to be trustworthy in those relationships. Put it that way. So, yeah, that's about probably the best advice I can give on that. There's no true or fast method on how to do it. And if you get 3 IEPs from different companies on the same job, those 3 IEPs will have different methodologies, thoughts, processes, scopes of works. But at the end of the day, they'll all have the same end goal, and that is that property clear? So what was the cause? What was the possible unhealthy environment? What was in that? And then what has to happen to get it back to a healthy environment? So that'll all be the same. It'll all be the same goal, because they have to put their name to it as well. They also have to sign off on it, so they want to minimize their risk as well.
Yeah, I think these relationships just take time. So quite often we only seek people out when we need them, but once we've used them once or twice and we know that their work is good, we just keep a record of who we've used. And the other thing as a small company is, if somebody doesn't do a good job, don't feel obligated to go back and use them again. So it's also your reputation on the line as well. If we have an electrician who just doesn't show up to a job, that looks badly on us. So it's about knowing when to keep those relationships, and also when to end them as well is really important too.
Yeah, and I guess that's a part of that project managing as well. Even if you're a single operator, you still have to project manage whatever comes through your door, whatever you accept, I suppose. Not what comes through the door, what you accept as a job. You need a project manager. Whether it's just you that you need to project manage, or you need to project manage your administration team, electrician, whoever. So that's where that comes down to. Okay, so I want to talk about now building a scope. So the data that's collected from on site that comes back to the administration side. What's the process of building a scope, and what sort of information are you looking for?
So for us, it's real. Once again, it comes down to timeliness of information. So our scopes are built straight after our first attendance. So we're looking at things that are anything that's kind of invasive. So do wall linings need to be removed? Is there mold remediation that needs to happen? It's those extra tasks that you can't accomplish within your make safe. So for us, the boys should know our technicians should know once they've done that first attendance if a scope of works is required.
Okay. And what would be the difference between doing the job and providing a scope of works? Where would that line be?
So for us, we are given a make safe limit, so a dollar figure, whether that's $1,500 or $2,000. Once we go over that limit, it then needs to be put into a scope of works because your suppliers and your builders have to seek approval from insurance companies. For us, everything comes down to money.
Okay. So if it was a private job, come through the private sector,
yep.
Is that different, I suppose, to how do you guarantee payment, I suppose? Is there an upfront thing? Do they sign some paperwork? And how far do you go with that then?
So for our private jobs, we always take a $250 deposit to begin with, because that's going to cover the time it takes your technician to travel to site, an hour on site. Once we're on site and we've assessed the situation, the boys will actually call up the office and we provide a quote on the spot. That's then emailed out and that's accepted. So you don't want to be leaving thousands of dollars worth of drying equipment in there if you're not going to get paid. So for us, having everything in writing is the number one rule.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so we're going to move into the next section of the criteria, but that's our first session done. That was that's this episode. So when we come back to the next episode, Lydia, you'll be here, and
yay!
we're gonna actually talk about the preparation and undertaking the actual restoration part, and what does that look like from a little bit of technician, but more of the administration side on. And I don't need to get into prices, but we need to get into billing, hours, how you're going to bill for hours, all that sorts of things as well. So that's going to be exciting. I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people really don't like talking about is money. But we have to be realistic. It's a business. We don't come to work for kisses and cuddles. We can't go and, buy a loaf of bread with a kiss and a cuddle. We all need money. So money shouldn't be a dirty word. Some people may say that restorers get paid way too much. As a business owner of a restoration company, I can tell you won't get paid enough. So, there's always going to be that back and forward. Is it enough? Is it not enough? But let's go into the discussion of the actual costs of a job, why it costs so much or why it costs so little. And I suppose where the market is at this point in time and at, February in 2022. So thank you very much, Lydia. The first session has been absolutely great. Some golden nuggets, and we'll see you on the next episode. So thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thank you.
By assessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, the Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, or surface, or organisation presented or mentioned in this podcast. And information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. The third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in these podcasts do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of the Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast. The Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with applicable laws of such materials and or links referenced herein. Moreover, the Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast makes no warranty that this podcast or the server that makes it available is free of viruses, worms, or other elemental codes that manifest contaminating or destructing properties. The Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use this podcast or the information presented in this podcast.